So Tua Tagovailoa, man, he's back, expected to be back week 8. Bruh, this changes the game, obviously, for this Dolphins team who's coming off the bye in week 6. They're playing this weekend, week 7. They're going up against a Colts defense that's been struggling. But I think the bigger question here, P, is like, what does this do now for the rest of these Dolphins that we've been panicking on all season, right? Like, we know Tua has a concussion risk, obviously. Like, are we buying
Hmm.
him? Tua, Tyreek Hill, right? He was a top 3 wide receiver off of the board. And now we're talking about him in like the wide receiver 2 tier with Tyler Huntley here at quarterback. A lot of effects here for this Dolphins offense. Talk about Tua's return, man, because this thing is going to change a lot for this offense, bro.
Yeah, I mean, Tua's return, it means everything for this offense fantasy wise. Um, it's for the like Tyreek's going to come back to being a top 5 wide receiver. You're going to see Achane coming back to to his ways. It's really everything that we have been waiting for. So I like Tua coming back. I'm not afraid of him getting hurt again. I think that they're going to, I think that he realizes how serious it is. I also feel that he may even come back with one of those padded joints on his helmet.
Oh,
The
yeah,
first
yeah, yeah. You
quarterback
think
to do
so?
that. So yeah, I think so. If anybody's gonna do it, it's gonna be Tua.
Poster child for that
Yeah.
shit.
It's like they made that shit for him.
Yo,
But
I
yeah.
look at Tua though, and I'm like, he's been an elite guy, but this is also we notice with Tua in the second half when like this fall winter weather starts to come around, like he's already a guy that like kind of tears down a little bit because they lean on the run game. So when I think of like Tua returning, I don't. The thing is, it's not like this isn't an ankle, it's not a shoulder, it's not a wrist, it's not an elbow. So it's not like we really even like have to worry about a downturn in performance. Like he comes back immediately into the QB1 tier. It's just a matter of can dude stay on the field because like he can't take these kind of hits no more. And he did so well last year with avoiding that hit, and most of this year, obviously, until it actually happened.
Hmm.
I want to believe in Tua, but it's tough for me to put him in like this top 10 tier when I really think he's more of a QB2, not just because of the risk, but also this change in weather does kind of throw things, you know what I'm saying, a little bit in loop here for Tua and the rest of this Dolphins passing attack, I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, so you're not gonna quite you don't want to put him in like a top 12 QB moving forward.
So no, that's the issue with Tua is that I think because of the way he plays and the way we perceive this Dolphins offense and the weapons around him, it's like we want to put him in this top 10 to 12 quarterbacks. And I think
Hmm.
at floor, like I could call him like he's a floor QB1, maybe like a floor high end QB2. But we've already talked about this P in the offseason. It's like that schedule gets a little harder as the season goes on. That playoff schedule, last game in Cleveland does not always sound good in December. So I think of Tua as this. I think of Tua as like kind of Kirk Cousins, Jared Goffish, like a name that we know has potential upside on a weekly basis, but we're probably going to see more bad games than we really visualize in our head. I think he's more like Jared Goffish than he is like a Dak Prescott or a Joe Burrow or somebody that's a locked in QB1 right now. I think you could
Okay.
sell him as that though.
You could definitely sell him as that. I mean, just kind of going through the games, right? So, the winner is going to start like, let's say, like what, around
Like week
week.
11, week 12 is when things start getting dire.
Yeah. So, week 11 against Vegas, right? They're at home versus Vegas. They're at home versus New England. They're at Green Bay week 13, which is going to be a crazy winter game. But then they're home against the Jets week 14, week 15 at Houston. So that's going to be a good weather game. Week 16 against the Niners is going to be tough, but still, the Niners have kind of been getting carved up as far as the secondary goes. And then week 17 at Cleveland, right? So, yeah, I get the weather thing. I don't think it's going to be that much of a factor because it looks like a lot outside of Green Bay. There is like they're going to be either at home or on a West Coast team, or you know what I'm saying? Like, and
The only thing with this offense, right? Since Mike McDonald's taken over, Tua, and this is over the last 3 seasons, Tua's only had one 300-yard game after week 11. like one, and he's played in a number of those games. So I think the upside that you hope for, like we see it, those 400-yard, 4 touchdown games that we see Tua throw sometimes, I think that's just capped a little bit. So when you talk about upside for some of these other quarterbacks, it's like, yeah, maybe on a weekly basis we could see Tua throw like 250 and 3 touchdowns, but like I think more often than not, there's a reason why this team invested in Jalen Wright. A team invested in Devon Achane last year, why Raheem Mostert is still on this team. And that's because they will go to the ground game. They'll use Tyreek closer to the line of scrimmage. They'll use Jaylen Waddle a little closer to the line of scrimmage when this weather starts to settle in. And it's a timing offense, unfortunately, for Tua, who we know it's well documented. He doesn't have like the strongest arm to be able to throw through any kind of weather. So, yeah, you mentioned a couple games in Miami, but in Miami, sometimes it's windy and rainy. Like, then you talk about Green Bay and Cleveland in November, December, and it's like, we know that's going to get ugly. So for every peak, I think there's a valley with Tua, and that's the biggest issue, is that you have to treat him as an every week quarterback one, when in reality, he's probably going to fence more along the QB2, the QB2 radar. So I like the player too, and I think over the course of the season, I might have said, oh, you're a top 12-ish type play, but like just knowing what we know about this offense in the second half, I gotta call Tua more of a high-end QB2 at best.
Okay, so if there's like a panic meter, right, on Tua, as a high end QB2, like what is that to you? Just talking about the weather, the schedule, and how they're playing.
I
One
think
to
when
10.
Tua coming back, here's how I play it, right? Like I would
Mhm.
treat Tua, and I don't know if you agree with this. I would treat Tua as like a trade option right now. You went this whole season without him over the last 5 weeks, right? So I would be looking for one of those quarterbacks that maybe has not been playing up to our level. You might be able to flip Tua for like Anthony Richardson in a piece. Give yourself a little bit of upside. You might be able to flip Tua for like Dak and another, like somebody in that same range. I would be looking for the ceiling here over the second half as opposed to the floor with Tua, because I think once we see Tua on the field, and if he doesn't have a 300-yard, 4 touchdown, it's like the expectation now will be dialed down for what he's going to be capable of the rest of the season.
Okay, so you're taking Tua. You would trade Tua for like, and would you target like a Pat Mahomes?
No, I wouldn't target Pat Mahomes. It's just that's a name value
It's
because you got to pay for the name right now, right?
yeah,
So if I
yeah.
was thinking of like potential quarterbacks that I would be like trying to target for with Tua, the first one obviously I think for me, and this is a Jahan type thing, but A
Mhm.
Rich is definitely like a name that I would be targeting because I think the person who has Anthony Richardson is probably looking for a little bit more consistency, and the name Tua sometimes speaks a little bit better than like an Anthony Richardson does, especially if he plays bad this week. They got a tough game against Miami. They're going to be going back and forth. So Miami's
Mm.
been one of the better defenses in the league. But I think I'd be looking for him, be looking for like a Dak Prescott. I think Dak is a good name you could buy low on. He's on a buy right now. So him and Tua would be coming back both in week 8. And I think I would just be looking for like that range, that back end QB1 range, or maybe a little bit higher ceiling than that. A CJ Stroud, who hasn't necessarily been a top 5 guy yet. Maybe you're pairing up Tua with another piece to go get him. I think I would use him more as a trade piece. Are you on the same page with that?
Yeah, I think so. But the only way that I would be trading Tua is if I'm getting like a lock, if I'm getting like a top 4, top 5 guy, right? And the reason why I'm not as, I guess, my panic meter, if I did have a panic meter, it'd be pretty low on Tua, not just because of health. You mentioned the weather. I just think the variance between like quarterback 8 and quarterback 14 is so low. It's very minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I can get somebody who is like a bona fide stud, who throws a lot of touchdowns, if I can get like, you know, like I don't think the trade would make sense to the recipient if I'm targeting like, I think Brock Purdy is going to be a better quarterback than
I
Tua.
knew that name was coming out.
Yeah,
But that's
I mean,
that's a
like,
perfect name though. That's the perfect name.
yeah, like I would go target like a Brock Purdy for like a Tua, but I don't know how well that's going to go out. Like, could you get a Jalen Hurts? Could you get, I'm just kind of going down the list of like, these quarterbacks and trying to see who I would target because I just don't think the difference between one quarterback and the other, if we're talking about like a back end versus like a quarterback 2,
Yeah.
we're talking about a difference of like 10 points. as the season, like 10, 15 points as like the season ends.
Well, real quick, obviously, like the Tua thing is its own thing, right? Quarterback in a lot of single QB leagues, you can start, 12 quarterbacks and find somebody to start. But like the receivers, I think on this team is where the bigger impact is. Tyreek Hill has been pushed down all the way to like wide receiver 2 status. Are you buying or selling Tyreek Hill, knowing kind of the same information we just talked about, the schedule, Tua's return, the timing, the fact that he could get injured again, in his first week back, as we saw a couple years ago, he came back, got hurt really quickly. Are you buying Tyreek Hill now? And if so, how are you valuing him? Is he top 3 guy for you, top 10 receiver? Like, where would you buy Tyreek Hill if you are buying?
I'm buying Tyreek. I'm definitely buying Tyreek Hill. Last year you can make that argument of, he fell off last year. Well, he was playing hurt, right? And you could make the argument of like, oh, well, they're terrible in the winter. Look at last year, right? Well, that offense last year was primarily running through Tyreek. It seemed like Tyreek had an agenda early on to really break that single season receiving record. And that just became the identity of their offense. So when they didn't have that, it's like, okay, where do we pivot now? Right. And then that's primarily where you've seen Tua's struggles coinciding with Tyreek's injury. You can't bank on injury. I'm still seeing Tyreek as ultra talented in a scheme that fits him well with now a healthy quarterback. Yeah, I think Tyreek is cemented as a top 3 wide receiver. I wouldn't see any reason otherwise. Earlier in the season, we're looking at his playoff schedule, right? We're looking at, the Niners, him going against the Niners, him going against Cleveland. Cleveland is just playing uninspired, and they're probably selling a lot of their defensive pieces now. Unfortunately, this new defensive scheme with the Niners offers up a lot of points towards wide receivers, right? Like Charvarius Ward doesn't look like himself. Deommodore Lenoir looks like a stud, but we're talking about like game-breaking speed with Tyreek. So
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like I still would be buying Tyreek now.
I think it's hard for me to buy Tyreek at like old draft prices, like top 3 prices. I don't think I would do that. But if somebody was panicking on this offense a little bit, I'd be looking at like top 7 to 10 value and really trying to find value there. I'm not going to overpay for Tyreek Hill right now just because of a little bit of the concerns I have. His mega games typically come at the beginning to the middle of the year before things happen. So I'm there with you, but I do think the sneakier play here is Jaylen Waddle. I think that's the receiver that I would be targeting because with Tyreek Hill, the name value is still there. We know like he's still going to command a wide receiver 1 price tag for whoever's trading him. But Jaylen Waddle right now, you might be able to get him at like flex prices. Somebody might be willing to drop Jaylen Waddle right now just because of the name. And we know like if Tyreek Hill ever goes down, and even on weeks where he doesn't, it's like if Tyreek Hill has an off day, typically that's when we see Jaylen Waddle have a strong day. So for me, I think if you can target Jaylen Waddle and get him in that back end wide receiver 3 flex kind of area right now, and just take a gamble on him with some players on your bench or maybe some outperforming waiver wire pickups that you had, like I would be sending out a lot of offers right now for Jaylen Waddle before we see Tua Tagovailoa on the field, because when he plays, like Jaylen Waddle is a high-end wide receiver 3, more of a wide receiver 2 than anything.
Yeah, no, Jaylen Waddle definitely got some great value. He would be the one I'd be targeting to try and get at a discount. And just to be clear, I'm not buying Tyreek as a top 3 wide receiver. Like I foresee him doing that, but if I'm a buyer, I gotta talk. I gotta talk him to like a back end wide receiver 1, or like high end wide receiver 2.
Top 3 prices, bro.
I mean, hey, I do got deep pockets, so maybe.
Yo, and Jaylen Waddle right now is the wide receiver 59 on the year. Another selling point. He's already had his bye. And we know, like I said, this is a player who typically finishes as like a top 15 to 20 option when it comes to wide receivers.
Yeah.
Moving on.